"What do you ask of me?" he asked in a cheery voice. "Get another keg of ale out of the cellar, boy," demanded Frail. "Straight away, sir," answered Tennant briskly. "Don't take that tone with me, boy," shouted the tavern owner. "What tone, sir?" For that Tennant got a slap around the back of the head. With his ears ringing, Tennant went to fetch the keg out of the damp and dingy cellar. That night Frail seemed a little more upset than usual, and he was going to try his best to stay on his good side. The keg of ale he picked up from the pile in the corner didn't seem as heavy as before. But when he reached the top of the creaky wooden stairs, Tennant tripped over a misshapen step and lost his grip on the keg, and sent it flying into the packed crowd. The drunken bakery worker was minding his own business, and out of nowhere, a keg smashed into his head. The drunk toppled off his chair, turning the table over as he crashed to the floor. Everyone scrambled out of the way of the spreading pool of ale. The pale brown ale splashed into the dirty wooden floor like a foaming river, spreading across the floor and in amongst the people. It was the worst thing Tennant had done in years. Frail wasn't pleased with this latest development. He watched as all of his profit went down the drain. Although Frail was sometimes proud of how well the boy worked, he was just sick and tired of the boy's mess-ups. Not that they happened very often, but he couldn't show his customers that he tolerated carelessness. So he went over and pulled Tennant by his tunic with a great tug. Tennant's shirt wasn't made of the strongest material in the world, and tore to reveal the red stone, which gleamed like a beacon on a far-off mountain. Frail tried to grab the precious stone as soon as he saw it, thinking that it would easily cover the damages. But the red stone started to glow, and when Frail touched it, a bright red flash engulfed him and sent him flying across the room into a support beam. Frail slid down to the ground. Everybody turned and looked at Tennant and Frail, mouths agape. There was utter silence before everyone's eyes drifted towards the red jewel, which shone brightly. Tennant's stomach turned itself over as he looked down at the red stone in horror. What was going on? The more hardened people in the tavern took a step towards Tennant, wanting the red stone for himself. Others followed. None of them were saying anything. The customers also wanted this jewel. Tennant shifted around, but there was no way to escape. He was surrounded on all sides. They almost got to him and the stone, but Tennant was too fast for them. One of them tried to grab him, but he ducked out of the way and punched the man in the stomach. Others weren't so lucky. Tennant went into a frenzy of kicking, punching, and throwing people around the tavern. He was doing all he could to stay alive. A big tree logger from the local forest had his axe with him. The big man swung at Tennant, who ducked, dodging the blade by mere fractions of an inch. The axe cut into the main support pillar, almost cutting it in half. Tennant didn't know how he was doing all of this, but he didn't have time to think about it. The crowd had now gathered around him, and he was about to attack him, when the front door burst open with a loud bang. The mob turned towards the door to see who was there. There in the doorway stood a heavily cloaked man, holding an old wooden staff. "The party's over. Everyone must leave immediately," commanded the cloaked figure. The mob just stared at him, unmoving, not wanting to listen to some stranger from the night. "Why should we?" shouted somebody at the back of the mob, where it was safer. The cloaked man pointed his wooden staff at the man. The man's hat went up in flames. The mob turned and looked at the man, who was running around, screaming with his hair also now on fire, and then at the man in the doorway. They all suddenly had pressing arrangements elsewhere, and ran out the back of the tavern, the man on fire following close behind. The man dunked his head in the water trough, dousing the flames. Once the man had recovered his senses and made sure that all the flames were out, he headed for the authorities. The cloaked man approached him. Tennant didn't know if he should run or thank the man. Before the cloaked man could get any closer, Frail jumped up and grabbed Tennant by the throat. A sharp kitchen knife hovered by his neck. Frail really didn't want to do this, but he felt like he had no choice. His business could be ruined. "What are you doing? Smashing up the place. It scared away my customers," spat Frail in his ear. "It wasn't my fault," whimpered Tennant. The red stone was hot against his chest. Then, before he knew what he was doing, he hid the knife away and grabbed Frail by the arms and threw him over his shoulder and into the already damaged support pillar, snapping it in half. "Let's get out of here," shouted the cloaked figure. They went out the back door, dragging Frail with him. They watched as parts of the second floor fell onto the first, with a tremendous crash, which echoed away into the night. Tennant and the man carried the sleeping Frail to the barn, and placed him onto a pile of hay. "I think we should go now," stated the cloaked figure. "Why should I go with you? I don't even know you." The cloaked figure pulled down his hood. Underneath was a middle-aged man with dark black hair and light green eyes. "Hello, Tenant Benamor. I'm Remitor, Wizard of Milan." "Hey, how did you know my name?" "A crow told me." "So that was your crow?" asked Tenant. "Wait a minute. How can a crow tell you my name?"
"Easy, Sonny. I whispered it in his ear,"
replied a croaking voice. Tenant jumped back. There was a talking crow on his shoulder, and he hadn't even noticed that it had landed there. "How can a crow talk?" asked Tenant, thinking this must be a dream. "There's no time for that. We have to go before the mob comes back with reinforcements," said Remitor. Tenant quickly dashed up the ladder and gathered his things into an old rucksack. He only had one set of spare clothes, so there wasn't much to put in. Once they were out of the barn, Frail opened his eyes slightly and whispered, "I'm sorry, boy." Went to the stables and found that there were 3 horses and a donkey in the stalls. There was a big black horse that wasn't there this morning. Remitar took this horse out of the stables. Frail's horse stood there in the stall, scraping its front hoof on the ground, snorting as if it was eager to go somewhere. Tenant saddled up the horse. He hoped Frail wouldn't mind. He had ridden the horse before, and had no problems. As they rode away, Tenant looked back at the tavern called the Stunted Dwarf, his home from since he could remember, moving too fast for Tenant to even notice what he was doing. He just knew he must get away before the law came around. Tenant also hoped that Frail wasn't too mad at him or too badly injured. Remitar led them out of the town to the north. It was close to midnight when Remitar suggested setting up camp for the night. They found a small clearing to the side of the road, where the wizard set up a big tent while Tenant collected firewood and took care of the horses. The tent was set up in a good time and seemed too big to have come out of his saddlebag, because it had 3 small rooms and a main room, where Tenant built a fire, a task he had done many times before, back at the tavern. That riding had made him hungry. They sat around the fire and ate their supper of red meat, potatoes, bread, cheese, and some grape juice. The wizard sat there opposite him, eating his food casually, as if he had known Tenant for ages and was comfortable in his presence. Tenant enjoyed the food. It was the best meal he could remember ever eating. Tenant felt better and was ready to ask some questions. "Where are you taking me, and why did you give me this red stone?" asked Tenant suddenly after taking a sip of his fruit juice. "Because you were chosen by the red stone," answered Remitar, placing his mug of wine on the ground so he could clean his teeth with a toothpick. "Right, Crow?"
"Yes, but I have a name, you know, and I'm your master,"
cried the Black Crow.
"My apologies, Master Vincent."
"Your master's a crow?" said Tenant with a smirk.
No, Sonny. I just use this crow form when I'm too busy to come in person."
"So you can be in 2 places at the same time?"
"Yes, it's quite easy once you get used to it.
remarked Master Vincent.
When you get to Ramchester, you can see me in person."
"Wow, we're going to the capital? I've never been there before. It must be magnificent."
"It is, but the wonder wears off after a while."
"Why was I chosen, and what have I been chosen for?" asked Tenant.
"We can't tell you at the moment,"
said Remitar, wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. "Why?"
"It could be too dangerous. Besides, we don't know too much ourselves,"
said Remitar. "Please," pleaded Tenant.
"You will find out eventually," said the crow. "Now both of you need some rest."
Remitar went off to one of the bedrooms.
"See you in the morning."
Tenant nodded and set into the fire, hoping that the townspeople didn't find them in the night. He was in awe. He had actually been talking to a wizard. Taken over by tiredness, Tenant soon fell asleep.